Joining us to talk more about it, Peter Mathews, political analyst and professor of political science at Cypress College, and Troy Slayton, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, both joining us via Skype from Los Angeles on your Saturday evening, Sunday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Troy, I want to begin with you. According to the New York Times story, McGahn revealed everything he knows about the investigation. Here are the main topics from the report. Trump's mindset leading up to the Comey firing, the president's attacks on Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and any attempts to fire the special counsels. Troy, help us understand the idea of White House counsel turned cooperating witness. And does it sound like he helped or perhaps hurt the president?
Well, because we weren't in there in the questioning of the White House counsel by the special counsel, we don't know whether it helped or hurt. But to say that this is unusual would be an understatement. For the White House counsel, that means the attorney for the president of the United States, to talk to somebody that is investigating the president is highly unusual. But the president waived not only any type of attorney-client privilege, but also waived any claim of executive privilege.
And Troy, so why did they do this? One school of thought is that McGahn sees himself as representing the office of the presidency and not the president himself. But he talked for 30 hours on 3 separate occasions. That sounds like a lot.
That does sound like a lot. And, you know, I've sat in on depositions myself that, you know, shouldn't have taken that long. Attorneys, especially when they're not in front of a jury, tend to ask a lot of questions. And it's possible that the special counsel investigators found out other information during the course of their investigation, and then they wanted to come back and talk to Don McGahn about it. So Don McGahn looks at himself, like you said, as protecting the office of the presidency. It makes others observers worried that the president may have affected future administrations by giving up this claim of executive privilege and allowing the attorney for the White House to talk about private conversations that the White House counsel may have had with the president about things having to do with what the special counsel is investigating, namely whether or not the president tried to obstruct the special counsel's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election.
Right. Okay, I want to ask you, Peter, do you agree with Troy that this is very unusual, uncharacteristic?
It certainly is. I mean, 30 hours over a 9-month period. And this is an inside person. You know, the White House counsel knew a lot of things were going on. And furthermore, I think there was a time when the White House counsel, Don McGahn, felt that the president might have been setting him up for a fall to take the blame for any kind of obstruction of justice. And don't forget that there's an intent is really important. Mr. Mueller has to establish intent in terms of corrupt practice. And it's collusion is not a crime, but corrupt collaboration is very much, a conspiracy is very much of a crime. And that's where the intent has to be established. And so with McGahn speaking about detailed information of various incidents that related to this, Mr. Mueller could actually have established intent, corrupt intent possibly.
So in part, do you think this was a move to say, with McGahn cooperating, with Trump's blessing, there's nothing to show here, there's nothing to reveal here?
Well, I think what happened was at the beginning, the president said, let's just cooperate, and that way we'll get it over with quickly. That's what he thought would happen, but it didn't. And as Troy mentioned, Mr. Mueller kept going on in terms of interviews, and it turned out differently than what the president expected. And so I think McGahn was able to talk a lot more than he otherwise would have more recently. So this was not intended for him to talk that much, but something has happened here, and I think it's very interesting to see what will come out of this in the end.
Peter, Mr. Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, indicated the fact that McGahn's cooperation came out or was publicized by the New York Times, perhaps a move by special counsel to encourage the president to do the same. What do you think?
That would be quite interesting and wishful thinking. Hopefully he will do the same. And I'm not sure anyone can encourage Mr. Trump to do anything if he doesn't want to do it. So we'll have to wait and see what he will do. But yeah, I think encouraging Mr. McGahn to talk, and I think McGahn seeing that he needs he has to be very honest and straightforward in this. And he was for 30 hours of testimony. Something here, I think substantive could come out of this, very, very much so.
I heard analysis earlier on CNN that back in the days of President Nixon, who was impeached, that he was seen as shrewd and could perhaps represent himself well. However, this current president, President Trump, is known for mistruths and not even being honest with his own legal team. One lawyer at least quit over that. So, Troy, what do you think as far as will this White House get to a point that it would allow or encourage this president to speak, or is it best to maintain mum's the best when it comes to Donald Trump?
I think that's really anyone's guess, Natalie. There's no saying what will eventually happen with regard to the president testifying. But it's important to note that the president's lawyers that he brought in, now his personal lawyers, not the White House counsel's office, but his own personal lawyers, John Dowd, Cobb, both suggested to the president that he waive his claims of privilege to allow the White House counsel to cooperate fully with the special counsel. So it was the president's own lawyers that said we should take this open book, transparent approach. They've given millions of pages of documents to the special counsel, told the special counsel that the White House's own lawyer is free to talk to you about anything that you want to ask him about. That's pretty much being an open book. And whether it's not, it's going to come to bite the president in the behind later on, that's anyone's guess.
We'll have to leave it there. It will be an interesting week, though. Perhaps we'll have the Manafort verdict. The president may feel things closing in. And, of course, there are the Omarosa tapes. Much more to speak about next time. Thank you both, Troy Slayton and Peter Mathews. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Natalie.